Hello there. This video is going to show you a brief tutorial of how to reverse code negatively worded survey items, compute Cronbach's alpha to make sure that you did that correctly, and to see if all of these survey items or survey questions appear to be tapping into the same construct, and then to create a mean scale score for analysis. Because remember, when you do an analysis with survey data, you rarely look at each item individually. All of these survey items or questions are designed to all tap into, in this case, self-esteem. And so we want to make sure that people responded similarly to these items, such that if they had, high scores on this one, they tended to have higher scores on this one. Now we're going to reverse code because these red items are indicative of less self-esteem. So in an effort to have all of our items scaled so that higher scores mean more self-esteem, we're going to have to flip the scale for these so that if somebody gave themselves a low rating here, it'll have a high score because a low rating here actually indicates more self-esteem. Cronbach's alpha is really nice because it can help you find out if you forgot to do some reverse coding, or if there's some items in here that don't really measure the same thing as the other items, so that when you create your mean scale score, you can be confident in interpreting it, so that we can be confident when we turn all these into one average for each person or one mean, we're really tapping into the same thing. Now, Cronbach's alpha doesn't tell us if we're measuring self-esteem. It just tells us that all these questions appear to be measuring the same thing. There's other types of analyses and research that has to be done to figure out the validity of an item to see if it's actually measuring self-esteem. But that's why we went and got a empirically validated survey scale that somebody else did that work for us. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to show you how to first get Cronbach's alpha to show why we're going to need to do some reverse coding, and then I'll show you some reverse coding. So I'm going to pop into SPSS, and here you will see those self-esteem items. I have the variable labels as SE, ST, and then 1 through 10, and those correspond to these survey questions right here. So if I go into SPSS and I forget to do my reverse coding, and I'm just like, okay, what's my alpha? First, this is my variable view, just in case you've never seen SPSS. So these are all my survey items. This tells me all the information about them. This tells me also how they were coded, right? So if I click here, you can see that 1 to 7 scale. And then real quick, if I go to data view for these, I'm just going to double click this and it'll take me to data view, but I can also click between. Now, each row represents one person who completed the survey, and each column represents their ratings on those survey questions. All right, so back to business here. We're going to go to Analyze, Scale, Reliability Analysis. And I'm going to go down here to find those SE items for self-esteem. There they are. Now you can also display alphabetically, and that makes things easier sometimes. But here we go. So I'm going to highlight all these. I clicked the first one. I'm going to hold Shift, click the last one, put them all in there. And then I like to just have a label here for my output. And I usually just make it the kind of the stem of the survey variable labels. All right, here we go. I'm going to actually click this too. So statistics, scale if item deleted. That tells you if you have a low alpha, which items can you get rid of to increase it. Hey, this isn't too terribly bad. It's pretty good. So now I'm actually a little concerned that people just went through and responded all the way down like 7777, because this should be a lot lower. So I'm a little concerned, but you'll see that there's some negatives here, which may tell us, oh yeah, we've got some reverse coding that needs to be done. So let's see if we can improve this reliability by going in and reverse coding those negatively worded items. All right, so if we go in, we need to reverse code 2, 5, 6, 8, and 9. And I'm actually going to write that down, 2, 5, 6, 8, 9. 2, 5, 6, 8, 9. And I need to remember that we have a 7-point scale. So I'm going to pop into here. I'm going to go to Transform, and I'm going to recode these into different variables. I do that because if I recode it into the same variables, it would replace the original. And if I make a mistake, it's really hard to undo that. And mistakes happen. So I like to keep the original variables and then just make a new reverse coded version for the ones that need reverse coded. All right. So 2, I'm going to hold down Control so I can select multiples. 5, 6, 8, and 9. 2, 5, 6, 8, 9. Pop it over here. And then I'm going to tell SPSS, because it's a 7-point scale, for these items that are negatively worded, a 1 becomes a 7. A 2 becomes a 6. A 3 becomes a 5. A 4 just stays 4 because that's our midpoint. A 5 becomes a 3. A 6 becomes a 2. And a 7 becomes a 1. And a quick way to check this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, we've got those reverse coded. Now I need to go in and create a new name for each of these because remember, it's going to create a new variable. So what I usually do to keep things organized is I keep it the exact same, but at the end I put an underscore and an R. And just to make things a little easier, I'm going to copy this beginning part and just hit change. I'm going to do this for all of them. So this one will be 5R, 6R, oh, forgot my underscore, 8R, and 9R. Hit change, hit OK. And now when I go to my variable view, go all the way to the bottom, and there they are. They popped up. I'm going to go ahead. I just hit shift so I could select multiple in between. And I'm going to scoot them up to be with their original. I'm going to try to go slow so it doesn't go all the way to the top. There we go. And what I usually do, because you'll see why in a minute, is I'm going to put the reverse coded item right above the original. So that way, when I'm computing my alpha and doing my mean scale score, I can make sure that if I reverse coded a survey question or survey item, however you want to rephrase it, I only use the reverse coded version of that. Okay, so I'm not going to do alpha for and include both of these. I'm just going to include the reverse coded version. So let me show you what that looks like. So analyze, scale, reliability analysis again. And now I'm going to redo this, get rid of it. And I'm going to put with R, just so that my output kind of stays organized. And now I'm going to select this one. I'm not going to select the original 2 because I have an R version. 3, 4. The R version of 5, but not the original that's negatively worded. The R for 6, 7, the reverse coded for 8, reverse coded for 9, and 10. So notice I skipped the originals that needed to be reverse coded because they are worded in the opposite direction. Now let's see what happens. Yeah, baby, look at that alpha. So much better than before. This was on the cusp of being unacceptable because earlier I stated you need to have an alpha of at least 0.70 or above to be acceptable. This is well in the acceptable range. And notice those weird negatives and small values went away. So that tells me that I did my reverse coding correctly. So now I can transform and compute a variable that's the mean self-esteem scale. So I'm going to do kind of what I did before with the labeling convention, where I'm going to measure it or label it SE, ST, and maybe I'll just put mean here to keep it straight. Now, importantly, you want to go here and do use expression as label. And what that does is it will record the formula that you put here in your variable view. So if you ever have a question of how a variable was computed, you can look at the formula right there in your data set, which is really, really handy, especially if you walk away from a data set for a while and then come back to it and you're like, wait, what was that again? You have it right there. So I'm going to type in mean, parenthesis, and I'm just going to double click these and separate them by a comma, no space. Just like with alpha, if there's a reverse coded version, I'm only going to include that one. I'm not going to include the original. And just to double check, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I think we're good to go. So I'm going to hit OK. Now I'm going to go back. This is the output view. So now I'm going to go back to my data set. I'm going to see my variable view. Remember that lists all the variables in the rows. And there it is. And you can see the formulas right there. If I go to data view and I go all the way to the end, there's my mean for everybody. Now you'll notice some people don't have a mean, and that's because they skipped those items, and that's okay too. real people are doing real surveys, and it's their prerogative if they want to skip questions they don't want to answer. All right, so now you're going to have a better idea of how this clean data set got cleaned and how to use multi-item empirically validated survey scales in SPSS. Hooray!